All right, moving on, let's talk to Barnaby Joyce. He's regarded as one of the best retail politicians in the country, and he enjoys great support in that beautiful part of Australia, the New England electorate based around Tamworth and Armidale, after losing a leadership spill vote. Barnaby Joyce says he's iced his leadership ambitions and is now rowing in the same boat and in the same direction as Deputy PM Michael McCormack. He joins us now. Barnaby, firstly, how's it going being a dad again?
Well, it's a great honour. It's a great honour. God, I'm talking political, aren't I? Look, you just look at your son and watch him walk around, and you can't help but it just moves your heart. And whether it's Seb or Tom or my 4 girls, being a dad is an incredible thing. Whether it's Bridget, Caroline, Julia, Odette, Sebastian or Thomas, you love them immensely, and it's the greatest contribution you make to the planet Earth as your kids.
Barnaby, you had a bit of a blue last week with Joel Fitzgibbon. He called you a neanderthal. I mean, he's got his own problems, hasn't he, in his own electorate with coal? Yeah,
well, I suppose, Neanderthal, it's an easy thing to throw around. They live in caves, caves are dark, and that's where we're going to be if the Labor Party get their policy with their 2050 zero emissions. The reason there's so much heat there is because Joel knows full well that the people in the Hunter Valley, the people in the seat of Patterson and Pat Conroy's seat, they're not going to accept being put on the unemployment scrap heap. And if you've got a party running around that's now basically the party for Balmain and Woolloomooloo and Annandale and Paddington, and not the party for Barcaldine, not the party for Muswellbrook, not the party for Cessnock, not the party for Newcastle, I mean, they're just not going to vote for you. And what Joel has got to try and work out is how does he traverse this crazy idea that you've got Mr Albanese, who is running around the inner suburban areas trying to garnish a vote there, trying to get Green preferences, and then trying to be plausible in Cessnock on Maitland saying, oh, well, even though Mark Butler wants to cap coal mines, and even though their own policy is to shut down coal-fired power stations and move out of coal-fired power, that they're somehow going to protect your jobs. Joel's the one with the salt in his tail, not myself, and that is why Joel crashed my media doorstop, because he's the one who's concerned, not me.
Well, today in the Clermont Magistrates Court, Barnaby, we had a couple of people who were found guilty of damaging mine infrastructure, in particular the Adani mine infrastructure. Now, their names were Amy Frances Booth, 25-year-old unemployed welfare recipient of no fixed address, and Reuben Michael Anstey, a 28-year-old unemployed fitter and turner. They were both fined $1,500 each, and no conviction was recorded, and the magistrate wholly deferred them to the State Penalties Enforcement Registry, which is SPUR, which is basically the authority that chases people up when they can't pay. This is an ongoing problem here in Queensland, Barnaby. We've got this Extinction Rebellion mob who glue themselves to bridges and roads, and of course we've also seen the eco-vandals, the vegan activists who storm abattoirs and storm farms and create biosecurity risks. What do you say to these people? I guess probably one of the first things you would say to them is maybe go and get a job.
Well, the fitter and turner, the Boilermaker, he'd get a job in the mines there. Stop being a parasite on the public purse and get yourself a job and start paying your way. That'd be a good start for him. He might be able to pay for his missus while he's at it, and that would be a great start for Australia, actually being effective, putting product on the boat. Might remind these people that when you look at what they live with, they'll live with a fridge that came in from overseas. They'll live with a TV that came in from overseas. They would have driven up in a car, which I imagine was a heap of garbage, but they would have come in from overseas, or a company from overseas with fuel in it from overseas. They'll be wearing clothes from overseas. And you've got to ask them this question: what do they actually put on a boat in their lifestyle, in their lifespan, to go in the other direction to pay for all of that? Well, nothing. They put nothing on a boat. Well, who is putting something on a boat to pay for their lifestyle so they can indulge themselves and going up to Queensland and making a nuisance of themselves and basically trying to put out of work many of the coal miners, many of the people who are Boilermakers, fitters and turners, people in the towns who in the shops who rely on that cash to keep them afloat? Well, the people who put something on the boat are the coal miners, iron ore miners, all those terrible people in the live cattle trade, those terrible people in the live sheep trade, all those terrible irrigators irrigating cotton, all those terrible farmers knocking over those trees, all these terrible people have put product on the boat so we can have terms of trade to keep these people in the state of the state of living. They're basically their standard of living that they take for granted, and that's what's so aggravating about them. They are an affliction and a parasite on our capacity to get external income for this nation. They never provide an alternative. They always provide a complaint. What they use is always the bulwark of the socialists, the communists, is create a moral conundrum, create guilt, and then force out their guilt onto the public arena, and then they say the cure for this guilt, the cure for this moral conundrum is another caveat on your private asset, another caveat on your capacity to earn an income, another impediment on this nation to have the terms of trade and the standard of living that it's got. And we'll call them for what it is, and that's why they are not the government, they are the opposition.
Barnaby, your old mate Malcolm Turnbull's got a book coming out shortly. Now, of course, you and him had a bit of a run-in, when he imposed the so-called bonk ban. He's been quite active in recent weeks and months, calling out certain things. He's certainly on board with Labor's zero emissions target by 2050. What are your thoughts in relation to Malcolm nowadays? Do you sort of lie awake at night thinking about Malcolm's tenure as Prime Minister?
No, I don't. Look, I hope that Malcolm finds peace in the period after politics. I know, and Malcolm used to talk to me about how this can eat away at you, and I hope this is not eating away at Malcolm. There are people out there, Malcolm, who hold you in high esteem, and I know how it is. I know. Look, I suffer the same bitterness myself at times. And you just got to accept it. But you don't want to turn into this rancorous polemic, and you want to be a person who accepts it and moves on and carries the dignity of the people who support you, and go on in the world to do better things and help others the best you can in the new position you have. I think that is so important, and I hope this book is not a disappointment. I hope this book is not bitterness. I hope it adds something rather than be a sort of predictable diatribe.
Barnaby, you were Deputy PM and Nationals leader when Mike Baird and Troy Grant banned greyhounds in New South Wales in 2017. I remember at the time vividly you saying nothing ever good happens when the National Party jumps into bed with the Greens. Now, you probably didn't hear me at the top of the show, but I was quite critical of the regulatory body in New South Wales, GWIC. They continue to be overzealous in many respects, and many within the industry have conformed, and of course policing and making sure that the industry is up to scratch is important. But do you think that the National Party in New South Wales would regret that decision back in 2017?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the unfortunate result of that is now the shooters and fishers have more geographic territory in New South Wales at the state level than the National Party has. Yep. Not more seats.
Correct.
But, and that comes, you've got to remember, never lose sight of the people in the weatherboard and iron. That's why I wrote a book about it. You've got to remember your voters are not in the better suburbs, and in the lesser ones and in the lesser streets. They're looking for those blue-collar jobs, and you've got to make sure that you respect not only the work they do, but the recreation they have. And look, the Greyhound decision was a classic one. I remember this, and you like this yarn. I went to the Dungowan Hotel, and the people were absolutely ripping me to pieces, even though it wasn't a federal government decision or state government decision. So I said, well, you've lost the bottom. Then I went to my local church, and the lady who presses the tape recorder and keeps the music going, who's the president of the local rodeo ground, she waited outside for me and probably spoke to me for the first time in about 20 years, telling me how disgusted she was in the decision. So I thought, oh, well, you've lost the middle. Then I went down to the polo because it's in my electorate, and Rosie Packer came up to me and said, what's this rubbish about the Greyhound? So I said, you've lost the top. What a brilliant decision. You've lost the bottom, the middle and the top. This is not going to work very well.
Yeah. No, and it didn't either. You mentioned the shooters and fishers, Barnaby. In Queensland, the Nats have also got One Nation, Pauline Hanson. They've got Katter coming at them, and of course Clive Palmer, who's spending a fortune. He's pumped about $500,000 into Greg Dowling Yeah, trying to... Well, and he's also... Well, exactly. I mean, ASIC have charged you. But, I mean, you know, the Nats are under siege in many respects. I mean, it is a very testing time for your party.
Always is, Gleeso. That's the way it is, you know. And you just got to understand that. It's been that way for the last 100 years. That we've always been on the cusp of demise. We've always been predicted to disappear, and we don't. But it's not by reason of that it's somehow a God-endowed right that you exist. You've got to realise who your people are and turn your compass back towards them. I remember being in the Federal Party room when, at the time, John Anderson said that we had to close the National Party down, join the Liberal Party, and people like myself and Fiona Nash fought virulently, and Bozzy, Senator Boswell, to make sure we kept going. But you only do that by focusing back on your people and making sure that they believe there is a reason for you to exist. Now, it's the same now as always, and what I would say is take the warning, take your medicine, focus back on your people, focus on their true requirements, make representation, regional senators, cheap power, better roads, dams, bringing water infrastructure into place, mobile phone towers. Understand a lot of them are socially conservative. Never lose sight of that. And you know, you got a better than average chance of surviving. But if you take them for granted, you're going to lose.
Barnaby, before we go to a break, you knew I was going to ask you this question, and I'm sure you've got a prepared answer. Is that the end of your leadership aspirations? Will you ever, ever, ever have a crack at Michael McCormack again?
Well, the answer to that is no, I didn't know that was your question, and no, I haven't prepared an answer, so my answer's always the same. Look, I want the McCormack-Morrison government to prevail. I want them to win. And I'm going to say the McCormack-Morrison government because I'll always put the National Party first. And the McCormack-Morrison government have a job to do, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that that happens. Now, if you're going to ask me to lie, I never will. That is, will you ever, always say never ever? Well, I can't read the future. You know, I don't know. Someone may pass away from coronavirus, and then people say you're a hypocrite if you tried. Well, I can't read the future, but I can tell you right now that I want the McCormack-Morrison government to prevail. I want them to succeed. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure they do succeed. And the alternative, of course, is the Albanese government. Mr Miles, the Miles Albanese government, I suppose that's what you call them. I don't know how it works. And they just haven't got the runs on the board. Mr Albanese really disappoints me. I thought he was going to be a real shock. I thought he was going to be a real risk. But I'll be fair dinkum with you. I think Bill Shorten did a better job.
Fair dinkum. Why is that?
I just don't. He hasn't cut through. Because, you know, I thought he was going to be the robust man about town. He's going to relate to the blue-collar worker. He's going to really cut into the National Party constituency. But he's a captive to Balmain. He's a captive to the inner urban sort of form of politics, which is a white-collar, upper-middle-class, professional-type person who, you know, doesn't worry about the price of power because they use very little, doesn't worry about blue-collar jobs because they don't have one. And he could have done so much damage to us, but he hasn't. And then they get caught on these things in question time where you look back at them and say, mate, that's just not cutting through. That's not the issue. That's really going to buy votes for you. You know, there are so many areas. If you went out there and said, you're going to build a new coal-fired power station in central Queensland, I'd go, oh, my God, game on, we're in trouble. But they won't do that because they're captive. And you say, well, we just keep on, you know, once you know they've run out of colour cards and they've only got numbers left, mate, you've got them in every game of euchre.
Barnaby Joyce, great to have you on Sky News across Australia. We'll do it again, eh?
Okay, good on you, Gleeso. Look forward to that, mate.